Triple H is forcing a major change in WWE, and we're going to talk about it in today's video. But first, we're going to kick off with some AEW news. And yes, we're going to talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling because it appears that AEW has some big surprises for tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite. Now, at the time of this video, it is June 21st, 2021. And Mike Johnson of PW Insider has reported that today there are a number of New Japan Pro Wrestling talent in the United States. And he heard that Tomohiro Ishii is one of them, which obviously makes a lot of sense considering that AEW and New Japan are obviously trying to get people excited for Forbidden Door 2. Look, Forbidden Door 2, it's very clear. If you compare my analysis from last year to this year, it's very clear that Forbidden Door 2 is not necessarily about stories, right? And obviously, there's a couple. You got the dream match too, obviously with Okada and Danielson. But this is really for the hardcore fans, right? So I can't judge Forbidden Door 2 based on stories because this year we actually know what the purpose is of Forbidden Door. Last year, I was confused, right? Like, why aren't they building stories? Why isn't there a big build to all of these big potential matchups? This year, it's pretty obvious. We know that's not what Forbidden Door is for, which is fine, right? If that's what they want to do, I think it makes sense. That's for their hardcore audience. I obviously think Forbidden Door 2, in terms of match quality, you're probably going to see a lot of fire matches. But with that being said, I like the idea of New Japan talent showing up on Dynamite to build it up. We still don't know the full card. Obviously, we'll know as we get closer to the event. And plus, we have Collision as well. So there's a lot of things that AEW can potentially do to build up Forbidden Door 2. But yeah, I'm excited for at least the fact that they're going to have New Japan talent show up, whether it's like some sort of invasion angle or just strictly there for backstage segments, however they necessarily go about it. I think that's good, right? To at least set it up, at least at the very least to set it up. Not a long drawn story, but at least they're trying to set up some of these matches, which I think is a good thing. Speaking of AEW and some really good things, this is actually one of my favorite storylines. Obviously, the heel turn of Konsuke Takeshita has been something I've been enjoying thoroughly. As you guys know, if you watch this channel, I feel like right now, everything that Don Callis, Takeshita, and BCC and the Elite, that whole thing right now seems to be the big story for me when watching AEW, right? Like, I feel like this has had a lot of small Easter eggs. I feel like it's been building up. I feel like they've definitely been getting people emotionally invested into it. And I think this is a really good thing. But what's even better is Don Callis and Konsuke Takeshita were on Talk is Jericho. And Don Callis said that he will be adding more members to the Don Callis family to combat the Elite. He says, I have no choice for our own personal safety because the Elite have made it clear from rumors and things that I hear in the dressing room. I pay a lot of people here, as you know, so I get information. Here's the thing. I had a family member with one member in it, Kenny Omega, and it blew up in my face. I will not put myself in that situation ever again. I'm going to have a big family. I'm going to have multiple family members, and they're not just going to be anybody. They're going to be the type of athletes like Takeshita that are on the same level or higher than Kenny Omega, and we're going to take care of business. Wow. That is a very, very big statement when you think about it, because Don Callis talking about somebody being on the level of Kenny Omega, it definitely gets you wondering who he could be talking about. And you know what's really interesting is tonight, Dynamite, we know New Japan talent could be showing up. Is Don Callis got something up his sleeve? You know, what exactly is the plan here? And I think that is a really, really big tease. And the fact that, like, look, if this guy has, you know, some very no-name, little-name guys in AEW joining his faction, it's not going to work, right? Because you can't be hyping them up to be on the level of Kenny Omega if they're not actually on the level of Kenny Omega. But if you're building a faction with really big names, really big potential names to join Konsuke Takeshita, I think this is a massive idea, and I think people will truly get invested into it. But I'm excited to see what happens, right? And you got to wonder, like, you just kind of have to throw this out there into the universe. You have to wonder if maybe there's some synergies there with Don Callis and CM Punk. And the reason why I bring that up is obviously because of all the reports and everything that we've talked about in the last, like, 9 months with AEW Brawl Out, and he's trying to go after Kenny Omega. Is it a possibility that this is the route that they go? maybe FTR, Konsuke, Takeshita, CM Punk, and Don Callis. Maybe this is like a crazy fantasy scenario that doesn't seem realistic, but I want to throw that into the universe because I think, genuinely speaking, if you're AEW and you're trying to build this massive storyline, CM Punk is clearly one of the biggest names on the roster. He just came back. And if you're trying to make money off of all this buzz based on backstage drama, it works very well. But ultimately, I hope whatever happens here ultimately ends with the idea of Konsuke Takeshita being put over, right? And it sounds like Konsuke Takeshita could be eventually headed for a #1 babyface run, which we talked about that a few weeks ago. So keep that in mind. A lot of big things happening right now. This is an exciting story to follow. Hopefully the rest of the show follows suit. Guys, Street Profits. What's going on with the Street Profits? Well, Angelo Dawkins was on the Masked Man show, and he was basically talking about, the Street Profits as a tag team. And one of the things that he mentioned was the potential possibility of him and Montez Ford's breaking up. And he says, I think everybody's just fascinated with everybody breaking up. They start out as groups and then they break off, and then you have that one dude who ascends big time. But for us, we're trying to, I guess, do what the New Day did, which I love that Angelo Dawkins said this, because I said this several months ago, that if you have the Street Profits ever break up, you can always do something where they get split up in the draft and you don't actually have them break up, because the reality is both guys are actually very talented. And I know a lot of people talk about Montez Ford, and I've said this so many times. Montez Ford is a very, very good potential top star in the WWE. But I think a lot of people also totally underestimate how good Angelo Dawkins is. And when you watch him in NXT years and years and years ago, I mean, this guy had like 4 or 5 different gimmicks, I feel like, right? And then eventually he does this thing with the Street Profits, and then eventually you see him transform his body and you just see him get better and he improves. And then you start to realize, man, this tag team is so good that both guys could actually be very, very big potential stars in WWE. I like the idea of them potentially breaking up without actually having them break up, right? Not like this, Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy feud type of thing. Not Edge and Christian feuding with each other. I don't want to see that, right? I want to see these guys like work with each other. And they could both be baby faces or whatever it may be. I don't think they're going to break up. I think right now they're doing a lot of teases with Bianca Belair. She's showing this new attitude. Whether WWE goes full on heel with her, I don't know. But I do like the idea of all 3 of them working as a heel. And then also just want to throw this out there. The tag team titles are being split up. We know this. You're going to want that tag team division to be very strong on SmackDown. These guys getting a heel run as tag team champions would actually be a very good idea. And I think that could be very welcoming. Guys, WWE announced on Pat McAfee's show yesterday that they are doing WWE Fastlane, and it's going to be taking place on October 7th from Gainesbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, Indiana. And obviously a lot of people are talking about this because it's Fastlane, right? And obviously in my Discord, I've seen a lot of people talk about like old school pay-per-view names that should come back, and I totally understand that. But there's 2 things that I want to talk to you about because Triple H is forcing a massive change. Now, first of all, WWE told Fightful that by announcing PLE events individually, it allows each announcement to have its own moment. So the first thing that's happening is WWE is actually trying to make each event feel like a big event. Props to them. Totally understandable. Makes a lot of sense. But the second thing that you're noticing here with WWE bringing back Payback and now Fastlane, WWE is doing this because they are going away from gimmick pay-per-views. Now, obviously, Money in the Bank, we'll see what happens with that next year because Money in the Bank was already planned for London this year. But the idea is that WWE will go away from having gimmick pay-per-views. And the reason for that is because WWE wants to bring gimmick matches to be a big deal for feuds when they eventually come to an end. So no TLC, no Hell in a Cell, no Elimination Chamber. Like those are expectations that people should have. Now, the important thing here is if you really want Payback and if you really want Fastlane to be big pay-per-views and not just be another B-rated pay-per-view, what you got to do is utilize some of those big gimmick matches for the main events. So this way, those gimmick matches are still on WWE television, but they're not so, it's not so saturated where it's constantly happening. So the idea that WWE is going to make this massive change makes the matches more bigger and better and more attention on them. And obviously that is really important. I love this change. I think it's a great change, and I'm excited that they're going with it. Let's see what happens.